The office, typically a sanctuary of productivity, was alive with the soft hum of keyboards clacking, the murmur of colleagues discussing projects, and the occasional phone call. The routine atmosphere seemed almost soothing. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the air conditioning hummed in the background as employees worked diligently at their desks. In one corner, the HR department was discussing a new policy, while in another, a marketing team was brainstorming creative strategies for an upcoming campaign. It was an ordinary day, or at least it appeared to be. Then, without warning, the tranquility was shattered. The door to the manager's office burst open. The sound so sudden and sharp it was as if a thunderstorm had rolled through the building. It echoed down the corridor, sending a ripple of unease through the office. Conversations faltered, and all eyes turned toward the source of the disturbance. A middle-aged man stormed out of the office with such force that his tie flung backward with each step. His suit, ill-fitting and a bit too tight around the shoulders, only seemed to exaggerate his anger. He was Mr. Tanner, the manager everyone knew to avoid. His reputation for being unpredictable and volatile preceded him. His face was flushed with fury, his fists clenched at his sides. The expression on his face was a mix of frustration and contempt, as if the very sight of everyone in the office was an affront to him. Behind him, at the office door, stood Ethan. He was frozen in place, his body stiff as he struggled to process the gravity of what had just happened. His heart was hammering in his chest, his mind racing to make sense of it all. The words Mr. Tanner had spat out a moment earlier still hung in the air, sharp and biting. Asterisk, you're fired. Get out of my sight. Asterisk. Ethan's legs felt like they might buckle beneath him. How could this be happening? He had worked so hard, putting in long hours and constantly going the extra mile. He was the one his colleagues relied on, the one they turned to for support. In fact, he had earned a reputation for being the go-to person when things needed to get done right. He wasn't just an employee. He was a dedicated professional who had earned the respect of everyone in the office, from junior staff to senior executives. Or so he thought. But now, it felt as though everything he had worked for had been thrown aside in an instant. Why? Was it his performance? Had he missed a deadline or overlooked a detail? No, he couldn't think of anything that would justify this. It was something deeper, something he didn't yet understand. What Ethan didn't know, what no one in the office knew, was that his identity was not a secret to the few who mattered. Ethan Carter was not just another employee in this vast corporate machine. He was the son of Thomas Carter, the CEO, a man known for his commitment to fairness, integrity, and a strict belief in meritocracy. But Ethan had kept his identity hidden from everyone at work. He wanted to prove himself based on his own abilities, not the weight of his family name. Over the years, he had chosen to remain anonymous, working hard and earning every accolade on his own terms. And today, everything was about to change. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside him. His pulse was racing, his fists clenched as he stepped forward. He wasn't going to let Tanner's actions go unanswered. His voice, when he finally spoke, was steady, but there was an edge to it, an undercurrent of anger and hurt. Mr. Tanner, I think you've made a grave mistake. Tanner, who had been too caught up in his own fury, stopped in his tracks. He turned to face Ethan, his expression twisted in a mixture of disbelief and disdain. A mistake, he sneered. What do you think you're going to do about it? Ethan's eyes narrowed, and without hesitation, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He held it up, his fingers scrolling to send a message. His heart pounded, but he knew he had to make his move now. I'm not just any employee, he said, his voice firm. I'm Ethan Carter, son of Thomas Carter, your CEO. The words seemed to hit Tanner like a slap. His face drained of color. He staggered back slightly, as though he had been struck. His breath quickened, and for the first time, the arrogant, blustering manager looked unsure. He fumbled for words, but none came. The air in the office felt heavy, thick with the weight of the revelation. Nervous whispers started circulating among the employees, some of them silently questioning their own suspicions about Ethan's connection to the company's leadership. Ethan didn't wait for Tanner to collect his thoughts. He locked eyes with the man who had just fired him. Do you want to take back your words? He asked, his voice low but commanding. Before Tanner could even begin to form a response, Ethan sent a short message to his father. A few moments later, his phone buzzed with a single, simple reply. "I'm on my way." Just as Ethan was about to leave the office, the door swung open again. This time, it was not Tanner, but Thomas Carter, his father, the very man who had built this company from the ground up. His presence in the doorway was enough to send a ripple of silence across the room. Thomas was a towering figure, both physically and in stature within the company. His sharp features and cold, calculating eyes gave him an almost intimidating presence. When he spoke, it was with the kind of authority that could silence an entire room. As he stepped forward, his gaze locked onto Tanner, who was still reeling from the shock of Ethan's revelation. "You're fired," Thomas said, his voice cold and devoid of any empathy. Tanner, who had hoped for some form of redemption, crumbled. His knees buckled, and he attempted to protest, but Thomas's expression remained unyielding. The CEO's voice was final. "Get out." The words hung in the air like a judgment. The security team moved swiftly, escorting Tanner from the building as his pleas fell on deaf ears. The employees watched the scene unfold in stunned silence. Ethan stood there, a mixture of satisfaction and unease swirling in his chest. This was justice, yes, but it didn't feel like a victory. The problem ran deeper than one man's actions. Tanner's behavior wasn't an isolated incident. It was a symptom of something much larger, a rot within the company's culture that had been festering for years. Later that evening, Ethan received a call from his father. He was summoned to Thomas's office, a room that always felt more like a corporate throne room than a place for meetings. The sleek, minimalist furniture and panoramic views of the city only emphasized the gravity of their conversation. As Ethan entered, his father looked up from his desk, his expression serious. "Ethan," Thomas began, his voice filled with a weight of regret. "You've always worked hard to prove yourself without relying on our name, and I've respected that. But what happened today? It's part of a much bigger issue." Ethan frowned, confusion mixing with anger. "What do you mean, Dad?" Thomas sighed heavily, his eyes filled with a kind of exhaustion. "Discrimination has been festering in this company for years. I've tried to handle it quietly, but I can't ignore it anymore. It's time for a reckoning." Ethan's stomach sank. He had suspected something. Small signs, whispers in the office, a look here and there that suggested a bias, but hearing it from his father made it real. "What are we going to do?" "We expose it," Thomas said firmly. "We gather evidence, build a case, and dismantle the system, piece by piece. But this won't be easy. There are powerful people involved, and they won't go down without a fight." Ethan's resolve solidified. He couldn't back down now. "I'm with you, Dad. Whatever it takes." In the weeks that followed, the pair worked tirelessly to uncover the truth. They interviewed employees, examined records, and followed the paper trails that led them to the highest levels of the company. But as their investigation gained momentum, so did the threats. Ethan began receiving cryptic messages warning him to stop digging. One night, he found a note slipped under his apartment door. "Watch your back." The danger escalated, but Ethan refused to back down. He knew this was the only way to make the company align with the values his father had built it on. Then, one evening, during a secret meeting with Emma, a trusted colleague, Ethan uncovered a crucial piece of evidence. A list of names, senior executives, and department heads who had been directly involved in perpetuating the culture of discrimination. As he scanned the list, his heart sank. Among the names were those of individuals he had once looked up to, people he had trusted. But the worst was yet to come. His father's name was on the list. Sitting across from Thomas in the dim light of the office, Ethan felt a pang of betrayal. "Dad," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "your name is on here. Tell me it's not true." Thomas's face tightened. "Ethan, I didn't know the full extent of what was happening. I've been trying to root it out, but I trusted the wrong people." The weight of his father's confession hung heavily in the air. Ethan's heart burned with anger, but a flicker of hope remained. "So we fix it," he said, his voice steady. "We do this together, no matter what." The path ahead would be fraught with challenges. The forces aligned against them were powerful, but Ethan was no longer just a son trying to prove himself. He was a man determined to expose the truth and take down the corrupt system, no matter the cost.